Welcome back to The Practical People Manager, the podcast for line managers, HR professionals and business leaders who want practical, people-focused conversations without the jargon. This is part 2 of my 3-part conversation with Ellie Kay, ADHD coach, trainer, workplace mediator and public speaker. In part 1, we explored Ellie's own ADHD diagnosis, some of the common myths around ADHD, and why it's so important for line managers to create safe, curious conversations at work. In this episode, we go a step further. We talk about what can happen when line managers do not understand neurodiversity, the risk for individuals and businesses, and why good management is not about treating everyone the same. It's about understanding what helps people perform at their best. Let's get into it. What do you think the risks are if line managers don't understand neurodiversity, or in particular ADHD? What's the risk, do you think, to the individual, to the business?
Yeah, I think the risk of them not making the effort, because I've had this with some clients as well, where their managers refuse to go on training for neurodiversity or refuse to sort of really listen or do a co-coaching session with me or anything like that.
Right.
I think the problem is that they then can't help. It looks like they don't care, for one thing, and they cannot help that individual because they are completely different brains, and it's trying to understand as people who are neurodivergent are trying to understand neurotypical brains and the way that they do things, then which is doing things in order of importance. Then the manager needs to really try and understand how an ADHD brain does things in order of their interest and what they want to do. So the big problem would be that they'd have a lot of neurodivergent staff leaving and setting up on their own, most likely, or going to other places that are more inclusive. And then I think that we're finding that there's more and more people that are neurodivergent. And once you realise that you are ADHD or autistic, or whatever your neurodivergence is, when you know about it, you start to then embrace it more. So the mask comes off, and you're less likely to put up with situations that you've put up with for years, potentially. So you're less likely to put up with people berating you for things that you cannot help, and that you are naturally going to struggle with because of the way that your brain is. So I think that there does need to be a lot more work around managers either going on training, but even simpler than that, just asking their employees what they can do to help them, as a parent would ask the child, what can I do to help you with this challenge?
So what sort of training would you recommend for a line manager then? So I think, from my point of view, dealing with line managers, maybe it's a core part of training that some businesses actually haven't tapped into, because like you said, more and more people are either being diagnosed or they're feeling as if actually maybe I am neurodiverse. What could be a typical training session that a line manager may want to attend or may need to really kind of support and help their employees?
Well, as a bare minimum, just doing like a lunch and learn of a neurodivergent lunch and learn, where they're learning about the different characteristics that show up for someone who's ADHD or autistic, or who's AuDHD, because that's kind of a separate category, which is quite tricky because you've got the two. Somebody who's AuDHD has got both diagnoses, so they could look. One day they could look more like somebody who presents like autistic, and the other day an ADHD, but more often than not, it's both of them up and down throughout the day.
Right.
So you've got that need for predictability and routine and consistency. That is what an autistic person likes, who deep dives into a particular focus of a subject. And then you've got the ADHD brain that's full of ideas and going off on tangents all the time, who's very resilient and can think on the spot and work under pressure. But there's the highs and lows come with those two abilities as well throughout the day.
Right.
So that is a tricky one. So in an hour's sort of talk, you would learn a bit about those. In a full training program, which could be a full day or like once a week for 6 weeks, which I offer, is to go through the different kinds in great detail, how it could look in the workplace, looking at a case study for someone that's ADHD, autistic, how some managers might manage it how you would be best managing that person, thinking about how that person is feeling in the moment.
Yeah.
That they're getting told off for something that they simply cannot help because it's part of their brain makeup, basically.
God, it's a minefield now.
I mean, I do feel like managers in general don't get enough training anyway. In the recruitment world, certainly I saw people who were excellent recruiters, top of the game, bringing in the most money, automatically made into managers, but then couldn't manage people.
Yeah.
And they were kind of thrown at its deep end. So it's very different being a great salesperson or great at whatever particular job you're doing to then suddenly be managing people and making them great and dealing with everything ins and outs. Because as a manager, you're not just managing the person in the office, you're often managing their personal life and what comes with it as well, which is tricky. Yeah. It's tricky.
I mean, that's the point of this podcast, really. I think in all the years that I've worked in HR, the biggest challenge is your people at the end of the day. And
definitely.
You see a lot of line managers who are promoted because technically they're very good at their job. And then you're like, well, there you go. Here's a team of 5 people, 10 people, 20 people. And okay, technically you're good at your job, but actually how do you start supporting, managing, giving direction? So you're right. I think there is a lack of training overall for new managers and even throughout your career as a manager. Let me take you back a little bit, and I don't know how much you can share here, but there's so many, I don't even know the right words to put, so many different versions of ADHD from what you're saying. So just take us through a couple of the ones that you've talked about already in a little bit more detail.
Yeah. So, there's 3 types of ADHD. There's hyperactive, which is just where you have the hyperactive traits and you don't have the inattentive. There's inattentive, and then there's combined type, which I am.
Okay.
So hyperactive is sort of fidgeting, moving, constantly can't sit still.
Yeah.
Lots of ideas, often interrupting. Probably talkative, but kind of going for it, really, I suppose. Risk taking, that kind of thing. And then the inattentive is the things around organisation, working memory, forgetting things, losing things. But also they have a lot of great ideas and creativity and empathy and caring and kind. So both of them together, which is what I've got, means that. And I think a lot of the combined type are the ones that start their own business, in my experience, because they've got the, like I say, the creativity and things of the inattentive, lots of ideas and things, but then they have got the go-getting, just go for it and think about the consequences later and just throw yourself in at the deep end. And that's why, people set up as entrepreneurs. But, and then there's autism, which has got a whole spectrum of different things in there and can look different to different people. I've got members of my family that are autistic and they're all quite different. But then the combination with autism and ADHD is opposite ends, really. So like my husband's autistic, I'm ADHD. We both on a night will stim for different reasons. So stimming is like moving your hands or using a fidget or something. So I'll click and I'll move about and I'll move my leg and I'll do this, whereas he will just gently stroke his hand or his jumper or his whatever for comfort. So I'm more going for the dopamine, he's more going for the comfort. So and like he eats the same thing for breakfast every single day at the same time, whereas I just change it up and I can't stand to think about doing something routine. He can read through 20,000 lines of a spreadsheet. That's what he does as a job. So he's playing to his strengths in his work. So he's realised that for his work, he loves formulas and he loves going through looking for errors. And same as he goes through like a 100-page contract looking for errors. I would be terrible at that job. I would absolutely die trying to do that job. But then, but then he would hate doing what I've done for 20 odd years, selling basically and talking to people and headhunting and getting knockbacks all the time and whatever. And so it's like say finding a job that plays to your strengths is key. And I think that is the problem in the workplace as well. There's a lot of people in the wrong jobs.
But what a blend for you and your husband then.
Yeah, it's brilliant actually, because like go on holiday, he remembers the passport, he packs the suitcases because my packing isn't good enough, it's too messy. So I think it was a shock to him at first, my bedroom being a complete mess with clothes everywhere and not putting things away properly, not putting the lids on things, and burning my hands all the time and stuff. But it's like even in the kitchen, I'll do the cooking and I'll just create something off the top of my head. And I love cooking, whereas he likes precision baking and he measures stuff. I don't measure it. I'm just like, haven't got 2 large eggs, so I'll stick 3 medium in. It's the same thing. But for him, it has to be precise. He'd have to go and buy that. So that just shows how so different those 2 brains are. So if they come together in one person, you've got that push-pull quite often. So the autistic side of the brain craves that stability, that predictability, everything the same, routine. But then the ADHD side say, no, but I want to do this. I want this variety. I want this spontaneity. So to a manager, that can be quite confusing. So again, it's asking the questions to that person, around what works for you. I can see that you're struggling for this. How can we change that? And being adaptable, really. And it's not because you're giving them special treatment or trying to pander to their ways. It's just, as a business, you are going to get more out of that person. They're going to stay, they're going to work harder if you flex it and show curiosity and show that you want to help them excel. They're going to do better for you.
Amazing, because I mean, most businesses are looking for your succession, your talent pool, or people call them high potentials. And like you said, you're not tapping into the strengths, are you? I think a lot of people, you hear a lot about the challenges of, being ADHD and being neurodiverse, where I think you do such a great kind of spin of, well, actually, there's some real strength in these individuals that we're not tapping into, which I think is such a different look to what I think I've read and I've seen, whether it's in the media or speaking to, managers or even fellow HR professionals. They're like, oh no, how do we deal with this person? Where, well, let's really tap into, well, where is, the strength in this person? What could we be doing differently? I think that's the key thing, is what could we do differently?
Exactly.
I think you tend to do the same thing all the time, where actually you as a line manager, as a business, need to be flexible as well.
That's it. Archaic businesses that are set in the ways in how they do things and have round squares into round holes. Round pegs into round holes, not round squares. That's what it is, I guess, when you're trying to shove someone that's neurodivergent into it. But it needs to really think outside the box, and they need to think, what can we do differently for everybody, not just the people that are neurodivergent, but as a business, how can we flex it a little bit more to give people a bit of choice? Because that is something that ADHD is like, choice. They hate being told what to do, but they do kind of need a bit of routine as well, because it makes them work more effectively. So it's sitting down and actually listening to what they're saying and thinking and that person will work hard for you if they know that you've looked after them. I've had employees who've worked really hard for me because I've looked after their well-being, and I've thought, what can I do to help them? I've offered them counselling, I've offered them private healthcare, whatever it is, to make them feel supported and heard. And it is just about using that small business mentality. In a wider business, you can do that. And then those people will stay.
It makes me think about the diagnosis bit. I know you said, you don't necessarily have to be diagnosed, but that must be, and maybe from your own personal experience, must be quite comforting, or just help you understand even yourself. Do you find that having a diagnosis is actually very beneficial, opposed to just kind of going with it and thinking, well, actually these parts of what makes me neurodiverse, opposed to, I suppose, trying to figuring it all out?
It is beneficial, but the problem is the waiting lists are so long.
Right.
You're talking like 8 years or something for a waiting list in the NHS.
Right.
Sometimes you can get it through with this right to choose within a couple of years. Depending on where you are in the country. But it was that. But I paid for mine private, but you're talking about 800 quid.
Wow.
To get a private diagnosis. So for me it was great, and I needed it peace of mind, and I had the money to do it at the time. But for a lot of people it isn't. They're not able to do that, but if they know that they are, and as a manager you can see the traits, if you do some reading, listening to podcasts and things to find out what the traits are, and think, does this person sound like they could be neurodivergent? They don't need an official piece of paper. It's just more thinking, they can relate to this. And what happens, in answer to your question earlier, if they do get it wrong, is potential lawsuits. Potential, people going for suing you for unfair dismissal or you know that's the main one really. Unfair treatment when they've got a disability, because that is what it is. So you know, if somebody gets told off for the timekeeping but there's not been anything put in place to help them with that, or for missing deadlines, but again there's been nothing in place to help them to manage that, then that is really treating them differently due to them having this disability that makes it difficult for them to abide to those two things. And then people are getting sued for thousands of pounds. When all it is just asking, how can I help you? What can we do? It's sometimes as easy as just checking in. Or you've got the deadline in a couple of days or whatever. You know, putting it in your diary as well as them to remind them, because it's not because they're lazy or they can't be bothered or whatever. It's just because it's like a difference and they're not able to see that deadline. Like when I book things into my diary, I literally look at the day. I don't look at the day either side.
Right.
So I can fill up my whole week without thinking of the bigger picture, because that's how I see things.
Right.
And I try to remember, but trying to remember, you can't just try harder. It's just not part of who you are to be able to plan effectively and organise yourself effectively.
Into what you say, I think that's part of the issues with line managers, I think, is it's that worrying of what the repercussions are. And you're right. I mean, ultimately, you could end up in a tribunal, can't you? Because you haven't made reasonable adjustments. You haven't put things into place that might help. You haven't had those conversations. And to your point, unfair dismissal, even discrimination. You know, ultimately, you're not following, you know, certain guidelines or doing just even the basics, human to human. What can you do to support that person, really, regardless of whether, you know, you're neurodivergent. I think it's thinking about the support, which in my position, in my role in HR, I try and talk to managers a lot about, well, let's think about what can we do differently here. You know, we don't always have to do the things we've always done. How can we make the difference? Because I always say, you know, when you go to a tribunal, you'll need to share with them, well, why have you done what you've done? What else could we have done? Because that's where you're going to get challenged, and potentially, it could cost a business quite a lot of money.
Exactly, and I think that's it. I think for me, I've always wanted peace of mind that when managing my staff, that I've done everything possible. You know, even when I've had to let them go, I've done everything possible to make that person succeed. I've took the time to sit them down, try and help them, and then I feel, because this is a big part of ADHD as well, is this rejection sensitivity dysphoria. RSD it's called.
RSD,
So that's like rejection sort of cuts deep, as in you feel it like a punch to the stomach. So if you went and asked your manager for help with something and they said, no, you should be able to do that, or I told you about that the other day, or well, just read that instructions on it, then it feels like a gut-wrenching punch to the stomach, and it can throw your whole day off. And that can be real rejection when you are actually rejected. It can be perceived rejection when a manager's busy and just said, oh, I'll do it in a bit, and then forgets to do it, or keeps cancelling your one-to-ones, not rearranging them. It makes you feel like you're not worth enough to that person, and that you're not heard or validated. And it cuts deep. Do you know what I mean? And then it can also be anticipated, so it stops people from going for promotion, putting their name in the hat for a particular project or whatever, because they're so worried that they're going to have this rejection, and this feeling is so deep rooted that they just don't do it.
Wow. Some of it's about being human, isn't it? Just how you treat people ultimately. But I think, like you said, it's got that added perspective of, I suppose, really thinking about the impact for someone who's neurodivergent might take that a little bit more deeper than you would do normally.
And I think the other thing to bear in mind is communication styles. So for me, I like to see things visual. I write on a whiteboard. That's one of my biggest tips to people who are coached. Get a big whiteboard, write down the things that you need to do, categorise it or whatever. It needs to be visual, post-it notes. I need to be told it verbally. I can't read through a massive long email of detail. I just won't read it all. But then people who are autistic or AuDHD, they like a long email with lots of detail and lots of information about what to do, rather than being verbally told it, or have a a picture or some sort of visual. So it's finding out what communication style suits you best. If I'm going to ask you to do something, would you rather me email you, walk over and tell you, or ring you, or what works best for you? And that's how you're going to get the best out of them.
That's interesting, because you can see probably a clash then in communication, isn't it?
Yes,
So ultimately, if you don't understand what the preference is for that individual, I'm assuming that's where clashes come, and there's a misunderstanding or
Definitely,
a way that the information is I suppose represented.
Yeah, and taking it back to the classroom again, because I started out coaching young lads, I started my coaching career, and the problem was the teacher would say something once, and then for someone ADHD who's distracted, it's like they didn't really hear that fully. So it's not if it's not written on a board or not written up, and then they're like, "Oh, sorry, miss, what did you say?" And she said, "I told you already, you should have been listening." And then they storm off, and the whole day is thrown. The whole day is thrown out then, because they have this horrible gut-wrenching RSD that makes them feel like embarrassed, ashamed, because shame is the massive problem as well. So I think that's where back in the old days with managers and stuff, I've been told to F off, shut up, all sorts of stuff.
What you had?
Oh yeah, back in the day. And recruitment office was Wolf of Wall Street, big time.
I was going to say,
big time like that. And so was construction when my husband worked. We have had, been made examples of and stuff like that. But today's world, that doesn't cut through anymore anyway, which is better, a lot better. I think managers just need to know how the softer skills, they need to know how to speak to people in a way that isn't going to upset them. So it is thinking before you speak, thinking before you act, and saying it in a kinder way rather than just saying, this ain't good enough, or why didn't you do this, or you should have done this. It's the shaming bit of outing somebody in public in particular will make that person, very upset, or will make them go into themselves. It's like a shutdown. Or will make them lash out and argue.
Wow.
That brings us to the end of part 2 of my conversation with Ellie. There's so much in this episode for line managers to reflect on. Support doesn't always need to be complicated. Sometimes it's starting with asking, what can I do to help? Or how do you work best? For me, this episode is a reminder that good people management is not about having all the answers. It's about curiosity, flexibility, and creating the conditions where people can do good work. In part 3, we continue the conversation exploring ADHD and workplace conflict. We also cover everything from mediation to co-coaching, and from flexible working to sensory needs. A huge thank you to Ellie for joining me for this 3-part conversation. I'll include Ellie's details in the show notes. You'll also find my details too, including how to connect with me on LinkedIn, TikTok and Instagram, as well as finding out more about my work through the People Expert. Thank you for listening to The Practical People Manager. If this episode resonates with you, please like, follow and subscribe. Share it with another line manager, a HR colleague, and join me for the final part of my conversation with Ellie. And remember, being a great people manager is not about having all the answers. It's about being willing to listen, learn and support the people around you.